I remember the first time it ever became like a topic was I was quite young. I would say like kindergarten, first grade, and there was something on Fox News that said like SpongeBob is gay. And at the time, like my bedspread and like my pillows on my bed were like SpongeBob. So like the next day we had to go to Kohl's and get out a new bedspread and like get rid of it
Wow.
because like we couldn't have that.
The proceeds of this monetized episode are going towards I Am Dying Out Loud. Find out more in the description. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me for Growing Up Fundie. I reached out to you because I saw that you were on the list of speakers for the Secular Student Alliance event coming up in June. And I am also going to be there. And so I just thought like I'd reach out and meet some people and see how it was going and see if I could make some connections before then. But the more I read your story, the more like wild twists and turns it took. Just like every article, every video was just like a new fact, a new fact, a new experience, a new experience. And I just really wanted to kind of get a first person perspective from you because it was just there's just so much I feel like.
Wow.
But what I liked about everything that I was reading was that you seem like somebody who is very your opinion and your personality and your message didn't change based on what media outlet was talking to you. I didn't feel like you were trying to impress anybody or like get certain opinions from anybody. You were just being yourself and you were just being honest, and I really liked that a lot. But
Thank you.
enough from me. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank
Who
you.
are you? What are you about? You know?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I was curious like how you came across me. So Secular Student Alliance, that's definitely a first. And I'm excited but kind of nervous for that. Never been on that side of that type of event.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And there's like I feel like every time I look on the website, there's more and more people talking. So I'm gonna roll with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely like went through quite like the media circuit with like interviews and radios and podcasts and like all this when I decided to like finally speak out about my aunt Vicky, a former congresswoman from Missouri. Um, when the Respect for Marriage Act was passed in early of December of this past year in 2022, she made this like pleading attempt on the United States House floor, like crying, calling it a disrespect to marriage and calling it a danger to society for LGBTQ people to be able to marry. Um, and it went viral. And then I remember like waking up and seeing this video, um, and being confused, thinking like, what's going on? Is this from like
Yeah.
6 years ago? Because
Yeah.
like she's has a history of this type of rhetoric. Um, and then I really like thought about I say that, but really I didn't really think about everything that would come of it in terms of like the response that it got. I did think about like, well, is there anything that my parents could take away or could I somehow be punished for this?
Yeah.
And that list had been exhausted already. So I like made a TikTok and it blew up. And
Yeah. It went totally viral. Yeah, that was, like, the first thing that pulled up when I looked you up, for sure.
yeah,
Um, and you said something in one of your interviews, or I think you actually said it in the TikTok and it was quoted in the interview, but I just thought it was, like, such a good statement. I was like, "Yeah," you said, "It's more like you want the power to force your religious beliefs onto everyone else, and because you don't have that power, you feel like you're being silenced." And I thought
yeah,
that was such a good statement. I thought that was just absolutely phenomenal because it's like, that's so real. When people want something and they don't get it, especially when it involves putting other people down or somehow restricting other people, they think that that is them being persecuted. When you're like, do you hear you?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
But it's so common, I feel like, and especially like going through this legislative session and just seeing like time again and again with um like Republican members of like different state representatives and like my aunt for one, they feel when giving rights to someone else that it has to take away rights from them, and
right.
that's simply not true.
Right. There's
Um,
not a limited number of finite rights in this country that only get to go to certain people who earn them.
yeah,
So because of some of the things I read, I'm taking that you grew up. Did you grow up evangelical? Was that your background?
yeah. So I grew up in like a deeply conservative home, um, in like a small town about like 45 minutes south of Kansas City, and I actually grew up like on a there was like one road and it was me, my aunt, the congresswoman, and then my grandparents. So it was like very small townish. Um, but yeah, it definitely was an environment where like growing up, I knew that I had the idea that my parents weren't going to be okay with me being gay. And I kind of got that first sense whenever I had an older cousin who was like was rejected by his family and was like couch surfing and got into like drugs and other things. And my mother made a comment saying like that type of behavior just kind of comes with the territory of like
Right.
being gay or something. And like at the time he had just been like convicted of some crime for like stealing or something. And um it was like being gay was like worthy of punishment by law and like my parents' eyes. And at that point I didn't know like my own history, that it was just like a few years before that that like the Supreme Court case like Texas v something in 2003, I believe it was, got like struck, where the sodomy laws became unconstitutional. um but
And
yeah,
how young were you when you knew that you were gay or when you started to think maybe you were?
I remember the first time it ever became like a topic was I was quite young. I would say like kindergarten, first grade, and there was something on Fox News that said like SpongeBob is gay. And at the time, like my bedspread and like my pillows on my bed were like SpongeBob. So like the next day we had to go to Kohl's and get out a new bedspread and like get rid of it
Wow.
because like we couldn't have that. Um,
Wow.
and at the time I didn't really think like, oh, what does like gay mean? Or it was more so just like, oh, being attracted to someone that's the same as you is inherently wrong, that my parents had such an adverse reaction to it. And I think that was like the beginning of when like the internalized homophobia started like really developing inside of me.
Yeah.
um but yeah.
And that's also something I think a lot of, especially, like, straight individuals don't think about is not only is there the external homophobia, but there's internal homophobia, and many times that's your first exposure to homophobia is just you telling yourself, like, "This is bad and wrong, and you shouldn't feel good about this."
Yeah,
And then I read that you went to conversion therapy camp.
yeah. I say that so happily.
Yeah.
um i I remember when I came out, I was 14 years old, actually, like 10-year anniversary coming up this July,
Wow.
which is crazy to think about. Um, but yeah, I told my parents, the way my parents found out was like seeing a screenshot of a text message that I had sent to a friend. And it was back in the days, like when you took a screenshot, it didn't like prompt you to delete it. And I
Right.
thought I was so careful, like always deleting my text messages, but like this one like caught like got past me, and it was like me referring to some other guy as like hot or like sexy, um and my parents, like, my mom was like, Who is this?" And I was like, they're a girl," and like they had a really like boy name, um or like, yeah, you could tell I was lying, and it didn't work. And um my mother, like, when my father like came like home from work and the whole conversation happened, my mom, once I like said those like magical words that I am gay, my mom, her reaction was like, "Sweetie, no, no, that's how you'll get AIDS and die." um and yeah, so that was how I was first approached with it. And my parents, like, they punish it was like their immediate reaction was that, and then kind of like, "Give us your phone, go to your room, and like you're grounded, like, don't come out of your room until we figure out what to do with you," type of thing. And then, like, a while later, my parents had like come up with a solution, and it
That's
was,
not that doesn't sound good. Whatever that
yeah,
is.
it was it was it was quite like the experience, really. And I remember, like, when I was up in my room, my brother, who's like 15 years older than me, but he like happened to be at our house, he like came up and said, like, "Just 4 more years of high school, and then you can go off to college and be whoever you want to be."
Wow.
um so that was like really what got me through high school. But like, backing up a little, my father had told me that there was, a counselor that he had found that I was going to see, and it was called Desert Stream Ministries, like their Living Waters program, and it was based in Kansas City. And I went and met with someone there like multiple times a week. And then, it was the following summer that I went to, um, it wasn't, it was called a summit in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And when my parents told me that I was going to this place, it was more so like framed as like a summer camp type of experience.
Mm,
And I didn't really know what it was until I got there, and it was just like people between like high school age and younger, and there was like young kids there, but they were all like sexual or gender minorities in some sense. And it was just like they had speakers, and that you sat through from like 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., like worship 3 times a day. And I remember like falling asleep because it was
yeah.
boring. It was awful.
Yeah.
And if you fell asleep, they would make you stand in the back of, um, like the auditorium. And me, I fall asleep standing. I don't
Yeah.
have a problem with that.
Yeah.
And they would go and they would get like water, and they would like pour it on your head until you like woke
Wow.
up. Yeah, and if
Wow.
you like continue to do this, there were some people who like did this, or they would like not pay attention, or they get in trouble. They would like put people in like solitary confinement, where they'd be in a room with like no windows, and then they would like portion off people's food. And yeah, it was
Wow.
it was a lot of like not really knowing what I was in the midst of, until like ultimately like years later, when I found like this Reddit like thread, and it was people who had like been through the same like Summit Ministries like summer camp, and like everyone
Wow.
was talking about their experiences, and I was like, wait, like we all, this is not summer camp. But I remember like begging my parents to come and get me, um during this. It was like 6 weeks, so a little over a month.
Wow.
Um, and a lot of kids' parents did come and like rescue them. But
Really?
yeah, and it was really gross because at the end they had like a graduation ceremony where you were like, the whole idea of it was like expanding your worldview to like go against the sinful world or something. So
So
basically, like,
basically telling them you're not gay anymore.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, so that was an experience. And I
Yeah.
think after that point, I really like resented my parents for it. But like also backing up, whenever I was first told that I had to go to this like conversion therapy counselor, I like told my parents what they wanted to hear. Um, and like going like present day, having these conversations with my parents about like what they put me through, they have often said to me, like, well, you wanted to go to that. Like, you were happy to. It's like, yeah, well, what would have happened if I would have refused or if I wouldn't
Right.
have been like agreeing? Like, you would have
Right.
put me in one of those like troubled teen programs where they like go in the forest and like, I don't even want to know. Um, so yeah, that was definitely like a major part of my life. But one thing really that stuck out was having to like live this kind of double life. Um, the school I went to, like I went to like a private Christian school. My graduating class size was like 80. Um, so everyone there like knew that Andrew was like gay.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of accepted and they were pretty chill about it. Um, so like going home, I had to like put on a mask to my parents. And then I figured out very quickly that if I like went to my conversion therapy counselor and then I would come home from it, I could tell my father like, oh, I had this breakthrough at like with the conversion therapy counselor's name was Andrew Kaminsky. So like his name was also Andrew, which was weird.
That is weird.
But like, oh, I had a breakthrough with Andrew and like being gay is gross. So can you get me this Gucci belt to remember my breakthrough? And my dad would be like, here's the card. So I really got in this like toxic, like internalized homophobia of like just saying like everything that he wanted to hear, but like everything that wasn't true for me just to get like that's how I got my first car from my father. And like, yeah, it was really toxic.
Yeah.
So
Do you think he believed you, or do you think he was just relieved that outwardly you were doing what you were supposed to do?
um I think my dad really wanted to believe me and
Mm.
that I was like very convincing. I know my mom kind of like knew that I was, especially like as it got later into my high school years, as my senior year approached, I got more sloppy, I would say, and just like so like backing up a bit, when before I came out to my parents, I had like a little bit of acne troubles. So like in the seventh, eighth grade, when that started happening, my mother took me to the Clinique counter and I had like little concealer I would put on. But after I came out, that all got like thrown away because like, oh, that caused me to be gay and such.
Wow.
And if I like crossed my legs anywhere, my parents would point it out after I like came out to them. Or if I like had my hand like this, my dad would like slap it. Um,
Wow.
yeah. So all of that became something that I had to be mindful of after I came out to them. And I would say like as I got more like closer to college, I got more like carefree in terms of guarding. Like I let my mask down around them more, so they got suspicious or whatever came up in them. But they one day my senior year, my father approached me with this like piece of paper and it said the Hartzler contract on it, and it was like go to ORU, get XYZ, and go anywhere else, and you're on your own. So at the time, I had never heard of Oral Roberts University. I was like, what is this school? Where is it? Like, like, why would I want to go there? Yeah, it was,
The minute I read
there's,
about that in your bio, I was like, "Oh, no. Oh,
yeah,
no." Yeah, for anyone listening who isn't familiar with Oral Roberts University, I'm trying to think of a polite way to describe it. It's a very, would you say, evangelical conservative school in Oklahoma?
I mean, yeah, that's a very delicate way to put it. I would say it's kind of like Liberty or the the other one. I would say they're kind of a culty, like a
Yeah, very
cultish.
much.
For anyone who like isn't a part of the evangelical like community or didn't grow up in like even when I like was a freshman there, for students who didn't come from that background, they were like really taken back, and like all the international students and sports players mainly were like very taken back like by the like speaking in tongues or like prophesying or like casting like demons out of people
Yep.
or yeah, it
Yeah.
it definitely can be culture shock for someone who's not accustomed to that.
Absolutely.
um
And they have like wild rules, these universities. For example, I remember there's one in Arkansas that will give you a scholarship if you will basically be a narc. If you'll go to school and you'll report people for dancing, you'll report people for like doing any of the stuff that's against the rules, you get to go for free if you agree to be one of those like narc students who your
wait,
entire job is just to tattle on everyone. And I know multiple people who got kicked out of schools like that for doing things like ballet because they said no dancing, you can't
wow,
dance. Yeah. And one girl got kicked out of a school because she went to get pizza with a group of people that was mixed gendered. It was men and women, and somebody at the pizza place called the school and reported them. Like these
wow,
schools are located in, not only are their schools crazy like that, but they're located in towns that just allow it to happen. That just cyclically keep that kind of behavior going like it's normal, and it's so strange. I can't even imagine what an international student would think showing up. They
yeah.
just want to play soccer, and the next thing they know, you know.
Yeah, like they get like a full ride scholarship to come play their sport, and then they're like told they have to go to chapel twice a week, and
Yep.
you get I believe it's either 2 or 3 excused chapel like absences, which includes like doctor's visits or like anything, and then after that you get charged like $50 per skip.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
wild.
like
I've
you
never heard of the
have to
charging part.
go.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, like,
That's
I
wild.
was I watched the documentary on Hulu about, the Liberty University people, the pool boy, and, like, I was reading into Liberty University's, like, honor code, I forget what they call it, but they have, like a whole guideline of, like, charges, like,
Yeah.
monetary, like, penalties for things. I remember like my freshman year, we all kind of like jokingly said it was like church camp, which I mean, looking back, it literally was like we all had a 1 a.m. curfew. And then every night at 1 a.m., like one of the RAs in the freshman like dorm would knock on our door and like look at a list and like check off and look and make sure we were both in our beds.
That's literally like a stayover camp. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it literally is. Yeah,
Not like grown ass adults living on their own, paying their way. That's
for
crazy.
real.
And so when you were there, you ran into a situation, right? Where you were basically reported for behaving gay.
Yeah, so I was reported my junior year in January of my junior year for um, like bringing my boyfriend at the time onto campus who he went to he didn't go to ORU, he went to like Tulsa University in Tulsa, which is like a private school. Um, and I got called to the dean's office, and basically I was told, well, first, like they like really seemed confused about why on earth I would want to come to this school. And
Like, first of all, why are you here?
yeah,
Just out
like
of
you don't even go
curiosity.
here. But then they like just handed me this form, and they were like, well, you need to sign this and then we'll tell you what your punishment is, type of thing.
That's
And
crazy.
was like, what is this form? And thank goodness I read it, because
Yeah,
it was a FERPA status change, because at the time I was marked as independent, and it was like to change my FERPA status to dependent, because they wanted to contact my parents to make sure that, basically, like, they wanted to out me to my parents. And I kept telling, like, I like read the form, realized what it was, and I was like, what is going on? And they're like, well, we just want to make sure that your parents are aware of where you're at. And I'm like, my
mm,
parents know.
they know where
And
I'm
they're
at.
like, and what kind of like really made me mad was the whole time I remember them saying like, well, we need, they never said parents. They kept saying like father. They were like, we need to call your father and make sure your father's aware. And it's like, number one, what if I come from like a single mom? Like, I don't, but it was just like so, at that time I was like very agitated with them already. So like anything they did, I was very annoyed at. Um, but yeah, I ended up not signing that. And they told me that I had to go to accountability meetings, which was with another dean, where it was basically just like more conversion therapy in a sense. Um, yeah,
So you are raised in this religious household where it's like gay is bad, gay is a sin. Not only is it bad and it's a sin, but we're not even going to allow stuff in this house that is accused of being gay. Then you're
yeah,
sent to conversion therapy. I use that word very, that is like, it's
right,
not real therapy, but conversion camp basically. And you learn basically how to lie to your dad in order just to be able to exist as who you are as a person.
yeah,
Then you go to this school and they're like, we're going to basically give you a ticket for being gay. And then we're going to tell your dad. It's like, okay, tell my dad on me. Like, what are you going to, so how do you go from like from hit to hit to hit to hit to being the person you are now? You're this like you're lively, you're active, you're open, you don't stand down to things that go against what you believe in and the people that you care about. Like your presence that I saw is just so it's got like this strength about it. How do you get there for people listening who are like, yeah, my parents, I feel like they hate me too. Like, how do you become this like now you're, giving presentations at conferences, and I saw multiple articles that you did were from like GLAAD and the Young Turks and like these big outlets. Like, how did you get there?
um, I think that we're that is a loaded question, but it's definitely like keeping maintaining control over my own life, and while doing my best to not be defined by my past, but learning how to move forward in a way that is like my own recovery and like healing. And I feel like a major part of my healing is like doing everything I can to ensure that like other students don't have to endure the same injustices that I went through. um and especially at like kids who grow up in very religious backgrounds similar to myself, and they look to college as the escape it's meant to be, and then they're somehow swindled or like tricked in whatever way to go to a religious institution. They shouldn't have to hide who they are at a religious university, because what a lot of people don't realize is religious institutions are federally funded. Like Oral Roberts University received 50 some $million just in 2022 through like
Wow.
COVID-19 higher education relief. That was money that went to the Department of Education and then went to all like higher education or higher ed institutes and like research that's done there on an academic level, that's like funded through federal money. And then of course, like FAFSA and Pell Grant money, that's also federal money that's given to like federally funded religious institutions that are then taking that federal money that's meant to provide the public with an education and then using that to like cherry pick who they deem acceptable or worthy of their education. So it's like, it's frankly a violation of everything that I know to be true about what America stands for and
Yeah.
like what like I would want my taxpayers to go to.
Yeah.
Um,
And they, as an institution, don't have to pay taxes, right? Because they're a religious institution.
yeah, they're tax exempt.
That's wild. So they're getting all of this money from the government, but they don't have to return any of it at all, which is just bananas to me. So what do you remember being your first moment where you were like, that's it. I've had enough. If nobody else is going to do something about this, I'm going to step up. And whether it was talk against your aunt or like what came first? What was the first thing where you were like, I'm done living this way?
Um, I would say that like going to school in ORU or at ORU, Oral Roberts University, it is very much a bubble. And the people that exist in that bubble don't really go outside of it. So even though I like identified as part of the like counterculture and the people that, I hung out with there were also a part of the we don't like ORU and we'll like not go to chapel or we were rebels in our own mind. But it wasn't until I graduated and really got out of that environment and started like diving into the world around me that is Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is actually quite like the blue umbrella of a city. Um,
Interesting. I would not have guessed.
yeah. So ORU is in south of Tulsa, about 25 minutes from downtown. And like now I live in downtown Tulsa, which is actually like a like progressive blue bubble.
I had no idea.
Um,
I'm glad. I'm happy
yeah,
to hear that.
yeah, it's nice. But
Yeah.
once I got out of that like ORU sphere, I realized that not everyone was against me, that people
Right.
had my backs and that it wasn't just me who thought that this was wrong. Other people shared that belief and
Right.
also other people like reaffirmed who I was. So then I could get over this idea that who I was like wasn't okay because my whole life I had been told that it wasn't okay. So it took a bit of that and then that liberation that I felt and like the the liberation that comes through being able to live your true self, uh, it was something that I should have been able to experience from the beginning of college. So I think that that
Yeah.
was a big motivator in joining the lawsuit, the class action lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Education. But also it was like word of mouth. Like people had heard about what happened at me while I was at ORU, and like the gay community is notoriously small. So if like someone in like Portland knew about my experience, so like
Wow.
the dots got connected in between. But speaking out about my aunt, I it was only a matter of time. Um, it was something that I've always kind of dreamed about or like thought about. I made a TikTok where I mentioned someone who approached my aunt in like 2012 or something at a conference when she was speaking at the University of Missouri Columbia, and a student there went up to her and just kind of confronted her on like when my aunt was it was before the 2015 Obergefell versus Hodge decision. So same-sex marriage wasn't yet legalized, but what she was doing was she was trying to rewrite the Missouri Constitution to explicitly say that gay people, or explicitly say that marriage was between a man and a woman. So basically, like, just like there was no reason for her to do it.
Yeah.
And someone confronted her about that. She was like, they said, like, how do you think that makes us feel? And she said something to the extent of, like, oh, you shouldn't be bothered, nothing's changing for you. And I remember, like, the courage that that guy, his name's Alex, after I made a TikTok, of course TikTok found him, um,
Right.
like the courage that that gave me. And I always like had looked up to that like person. My I think that video had been on or YouTube like 10 years by the time I made my video about my aunt. Um, but yeah, it was long overdue. And also, while I was at ORU, my sophomore year, I would often like Google whenever like I was bored. I would Google my aunt's name and look on news to see like what crazy things she had said. She's known for saying some absurd things, but I saw this Huffington Post article that said United States Congresswoman hosts conversion therapy group at the Capitol. And when I clicked on it, there was a photo of like all of these like people in these like black shirts on the steps of the Capitol. They were like all part of this conversion therapy group. And I looked, and I kid you not, like that Andrew was my previous counselor was in this photo. And
Wow.
it was like goosebumps. Like it was like full circle. Like the pain that I went through, my aunt was directly like empowering, basically.
Do you think that's
Um,
how your dad found out about him? Do you think she recommended him and you just didn't know that?
um,
Or just by chance?
no, I would say that my like just the way my dad is, he wanted like as few people as possible to know that I was like, as he would often say, like struggling with going down the wrong path.
Jeez.
So yeah, I doubt he told them.
And so has all of this impacted your relationship with your family in terms of like you made a viral TikTok about one of your family members. Like I wasn't sure if you even really talked to your parents before you did that or if it was kind of par for the course for your expectations of them.
Um, so I've come to a place where I've decided that the pain that I experience by sharing space with my parents and being told that I'm loved but not accepted, and that like basically being like constantly gaslit to like try and conform to my like parents' beliefs. And it was just like up until like even this year, something about like mentioning a girl, or to some extent like implying that I would one day marry a woman, um just like really really triggered me,
Yeah, of
um
course.
because it's like how I shouldn't have to continuously like shove this down your throat and like reaffirm who I am to you and
Right.
defend who I know I am. Um, so I like gave them an ultimatum and told them that they like I had spent my whole life trying to be who they wanted me to be, and I was done making changes for them. So if they wanted to keep their son, then it was their turn to change. And like I shared space with them one more time after that, and they hadn't changed. So shortly after that, I like sent them a letter and was like, "You chose your religion over your son. Like, goodbye." Um, yeah. So
That's
I
tough.
don't really speak to them. But yeah,
Yeah.
that it is tough, and like
Yeah.
especially with Mother's Day this last weekend,
Yeah.
it was hard, and it's something that like no person should have to go through. But I I keep having to remind myself that I can't get stuck up on like waiting for my parents like to one day accept me. I need to be content with the like very realistic idea that they may never be who I want them to be in terms of accepting my sexuality. And like, I am the only one looking out for myself in this
Right.
life. And like, I need to do that.
Right.
So,
Right. And
yeah,
that's, I feel like that's something that's especially tough because coming from like a Christian background, because I feel like Christianity is all about serve, 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 follow the
yeah,
rules, don't put yourself first, put others first, yada, yada, yada. So, this idea that not only are you putting what's best for you first, but that involves completely cutting out a relationship with your parents by their own choice, like that's tough. That's really tough. But at the same time, it seems like it was the best decision you could have made for yourself.
yeah, yeah. I, I really like, I've enjoyed it. And it's been like it was hard, when I was like going through, for instance, like really anything, but especially like when I would go on like live TV during this like press circuit, and I keep saying press circuit, but during like the few instances that I have done that, and like close people or like chosen family would text me after and like tell me, um, like oh, you did great, or like oh, I just saw you, whatever, and I would always be thinking like, well, like I know my parents watch this because I put in the family group chat like what channel and what time, but they haven't sent anything.
Right.
And it's like, well, everyone's being my biggest supporter except the people meant to be my biggest supporter.
Right.
So I
Right.
guess I'm gonna stop.
And the people who you're hoping will learn the most from the whatever it is they're watching, whether it's like an interview or something like that, you hope that they'll see it and like a light bulb moment will go off where they're like, oh, this is all he's asking. Like that's it. That's all he's asking. But instead it's like, no, it's just never happened. And you're like, oh, like you're so like
Yeah.
God, that's wild. What I would do is I would probably just send them to a camp that's like it's like conversion from being bigoted to being understanding. And just for 6 weeks, they just have to listen to like pro LGBTQ videos and speakers and things. I wish there was such a thing where you could just drop your family off and not tell them where they're going. But
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what do you see
Can't
for
imagine.
yourself in the future? Where do you see yourself
Um,
going or what do you see yourself doing? Do you have anything in the pipeline?
yeah, so currently I work for Oklahomans for Equality, and I'm the advocacy coordinator there. I've been at this job for like a little over 2 months, and
Nice.
it's like the best job I've ever had.
That's
It's
awesome.
um yeah, it's basically just like coming up ways of like how can we as an organization better serve and advocate for like the 2S LGBTQ people that exist in all of Oklahoma. And it's so much fun. It's very deep and very like heavy work, but it's 100% worth it. And I can never see myself working for a place that's like for profit or like, trying to fill the pockets of like greedy, already wealthy men. Um, so yeah, I definitely enjoy what I'm doing now, but like further down the line, I don't know. I know I love to like serve the people, and I love to like speak for the people, and really like be a voice for the people that aren't able to have a voice for themselves, or the people that don't have the capacity to like stand up and fight for their rights. It really gives me a lot of like honor and um like pride to be able to advocate and speak out for them.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Do you think you'll ever run for any public office, or do you think you'll ever run against your aunt, maybe?
Yeah. So my aunt, like to do that, I would have to move back to Missouri, and
Oh,
the district that my aunt is in is very, very red. Um, and if I moved back to Missouri, I'd live downtown in Kansas City. But regardless, my aunt had, because this past year, like in 2022, she didn't run for re-election. Instead, she ran for the vacant US Senate seat, and she lost. Excuse me. So she is officially retired. And she has said that she's not going to announce what she's doing like for the rest until like in the long run until her my cousin's wedding is through, and that's like in this summer. Oh, but like after I did the TikTok, my aunt told my cousin that I wasn't invited to the wedding. So
So if you had any advice, or if you had um anything that you would say to somebody who maybe they're not sure where they stand in terms of their sexual orientation or identity, maybe they're also in a majority red state and they are feeling these oppressive feelings and being told things very similar to what you were told by their family and their church, what would you say to them in terms of how to move forward?
it's always a difficult situation whenever like those closest to you don't have your best interests. But first and foremost, like my advice is to always ensure your own safety. And like, yes, it is an amazing thing to be able to come out and live your authentic self as what everyone deserves and like has the right to do. But um, unfortunately, like especially with the current climate that we live in as a country, that's not always the safe option. So before you act out on a whim, like make sure that you have a backup option if you're not sure of how your parents or like the ones that you live with are going to react. And um, ensure your own safety. Next, I would say that it's it's definitely something that needs to be a conscious decision of living in a state like Oklahoma that is very red, other than these nice little blue umbrella cities. So, like, yeah, I'm sure it's a very freeing, like, a lovely experience to go to New York or some other
Yeah.
very blue state. And especially like for like trans folk, it's like definitely something to consider when weighing where you're going to move or where you're going to live. But if you are in a red state, know that even when everyone or the majority of people in the legislature or those in power seem like they're all like turned against you, that there's always people, no matter like how small your town is, there's always people that they love you, they want to welcome you in to their family, and you can have your community and your chosen family with them. So no matter where you are, red or blue, there's people for you. And especially that's especially important to find in the red states because there's power in numbers.
Yes.
So whether that's like gathering up when it comes time to vote and making sure all your friends are registered, use social media. And like I got my start, or like um my first introduction to TikTok, it like opened my doors, or it opened the doors to the power of TikTok. And like I
Yes.
didn't have any followers before that. If like we all hold our own platform in our hands, like whether or not it's developed or we're getting there or we're on our way, it's our potential that we just have to put to use. So I like really encourage like putting action into what your words are, because it's easy to come up with ideas and say
Yeah.
like, oh, do this and this, and like I do it too. I'll think about for hours, like, oh, I can make a TikTok on this, and this. And then it's like realizing how much work and research that is. I end up just like editing some clips of a legislator together because that's something I can do laying in bed, like
Yeah.
sideways, staring
Yeah.
at my phone. Um, but yeah, like it, I don't think a lot of people, I hope, or yeah, because like when I was in that bubble, I didn't realize like how much freedom would come from being able to like stand up for the very like people who I once was a part of in that bubble community. So
Right.
if you feel oppressed, if you feel targeted, then do something. Like make sure you're ensuring your own safety, but like get out the vote, like make a mass, make a ruckus, like get the press involved, like stir the pot, like get people moving and excited, and that's how progress happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the best progress happens little by little by little because you said there's strength in numbers. And it's like, okay, you may
Exactly.
not be able to go where you live and make this huge, to do like they do in New York or Chicago, but you can make change. You can cause a ruckus. You can make some
Yeah.
noise in your own way. Even if you're in a small pond, you can make some pretty big waves, I feel like.
Yeah, and like
Absolutely.
community building and like making those waves, like those waves bring connections, and that's like
Yes.
the most powerful thing when it comes to like community building and like working towards like more progressive of a society.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like if you are somebody who lives in a small town and you think progressive thoughts, but you never say them out loud because of fear of repercussion, imagine how many other people live very close to you who also think the same thing, but would never say it and would never act it out because of the same reasons, right? You think you're alone, but I'm curious how many people you would find very much agree with you and have just been waiting for somebody to be the first one to say something about it.
Yeah, yeah, and
Absolutely.
2023 is far past the time to
Yes.
keep your opinions to yourself, especially in a time like this when it's literally like life or death.
Literally. And I never thought we'd get there, but, here we are.
Yeah.
Um, so if people wanted to check out more of your work or read more about you or find out more about the things you're involved in, where can they find you?
They can find me at Andrew Hartzler on Instagram and TikTok.
Perfect. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your story, your wisdom, and your experiences because the person I read about and the person I met, you just wouldn't think that the person I met could come from the experiences that I read that you've lived through. And I just think that's amazing. And I think you represent that there is life after these scenarios that you survived and there's life after the bigotry and the pray the gay away type camps and things like that. And I think what you're doing is just fantastic. I think it's amazing.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you. I can't wait until St. Louis. It's like 4 weeks
Yes.
away.
Yes.